Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us again here on FRC Media. I'm Keith Tebow. As you know, we've been discussing and talking to the candidates running for the 4th congressional seat, looking to succeed Congressman Joseph Kennedy. And we're bringing in another candidate right now, one of the 9 Democrats running in the race, Becky Grossman. Becky, thank you for joining us, and welcome to Fall River. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I am doing well. There's a lot to get to, and let's start with having you introduce yourself. A lot of people in the Fall River area may not know you too well. So tell us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to run for Congress.
So I'm a Newton City Councilor, and as much as I cherish that job, the job in my life that I cherish the most is being a mom to my 2 kids. My daughter, Madeline, is 9 and just finished 3rd grade, and my son, Jack, is 6 and just finished kindergarten. And I am running for Congress with the fierce urgency of a mom, set up by what is going on in this country and determined to make change. I wake up every day thinking about what the world is going to be like when all of our kids are grown, and whether we will have finally figured out how to stand up to powerful special interests like the NRA and keeping our kids safe at school and our communities safe from gun violence, whether we will have figured out how to tackle the climate emergency, and believe that out of, right now, out of 435 members of Congress, we only have 25 who are mothers of school-age children. I believe that if we had 100 or 250 moms in Congress, it would change the conversation in Washington completely. And it's what really fuels my passions in this race.
We're going to hopefully touch upon a lot of those issues that you just brought up in your open there. But when you thought about running, was there one overriding issue? Maybe you mentioned it in terms of being a mom and looking out for the future of our country and our young ones. But is there one issue that really overrides you that you're really, really passionate about?
Well, certainly gun violence prevention and taking on the NRA is one that really does get me going. I mentioned my son, Jack, who started kindergarten in the public schools here in Newton this past fall. And in his first days of school, I had to have that conversation that so many parents around the country are having, struggling to find the words to explain to him what it would mean to run in a zigzag pattern or find a quiet place to hide in his classroom if a scary person with a gun were to show up there. That is not a conversation that any parent should ever have to have with their child, or a fear that any child should have to live with going to school. And we know how gun violence has torn apart our communities, and especially communities of color. And we've got to tackle and take on the NRA. And I'm passionate about doing so. Now, hand in hand with that, that also means that we need to get money out of politics, because the only way we are going to be able to take on the NRA is to make sure that we are getting our elected officials to be working for our families and not for powerful special interests. And if we're serious about making progress on the issues we care about, getting money out of politics is necessary to being able to move forward.
A lot has been made in terms of the racial injustices we're seeing in our country following the death of George Floyd. Obviously, it's been going on for quite some time, longer than just the past few months. As a Newton City Councilor, has this issue come up in your deliberations in terms of defunding the police? And what are your thoughts about police reform?
Yes. So first of all, systemic racism is real. It's real in Newton. It's real in every city and town across this district and across this country. And we absolutely need to reform the police and rethink public safety. I support demilitarizing the police, ending qualified immunity, banning chokeholds, and establishing civilian review boards. And when I think about that video of George Floyd, watching him call out for his mother, and think about many of the protests that I have participated in across this district, one particularly poignant one where parent after parent after parent of young Black men came up to the microphone talking about how they feel fear every single time their sons walk out the door. That is something that stays with me and fuels my passion to examine each and every aspect of policing and police culture, certainly in Newton, throughout this district, and throughout this country.
I just want to be clear. You may have said something maybe in error, and I want to allow you to correct yourself.
Sure.
You had mentioned, I think you mentioned militarizing the police. Did you mean demilitarizing?
Excuse me. I thought I said demilitarizing the police.
I just didn't hear the D part. You may have said it, but with the internet and these interviews, who knows how it comes up. I just want to make sure.
Let me be clear that I absolutely support demilitarizing the police. Okay. I don't see any need for our police to have access to that type of equipment. That is not the kind of public safety that we need, or that keeps us safe, or makes people feel safe. So I absolutely would demilitarize the police.
All right. Thank you for clarifying that. You know, we're in the midst of still the COVID-19 pandemic. How do you feel the national government has handled this, and how would you do things differently if elected?
Well, for starters, I think that the way that the president has handled this pandemic has been utterly shameful. And it's like we've got the worst possible person among us who is, in the lead at this tremendous time of crisis. And if I were a member of Congress right now, I would be thinking about three priorities. One is what families need to stay on their feet. And I think that it's ridiculous that Mitch McConnell and Senate Republicans think that $1,200 somehow is going to be enough to get families through this. I would be thinking about our small businesses and what small businesses need to get back on their feet and to make sure that there's a business to come back to on the other side of this. And I would be thinking about how we are going to ensure the health and safety going forward. And that also gets into the lack of affordable health care in this country, and how disproportionately we've seen how the pandemic is in particular affecting communities of color. And for far too long, families have been uninsured and underinsured in this country. And that's something that we've got to get serious about as we're thinking about the health and well-being of working families coming out of this crisis.
Yeah, let me delve right into that then. What are your thoughts in terms of making healthcare coverage more affordable for people? Are you in favor of Medicare for all? Are you in favor of a public option somewhere in between?
So my underlying value on this is making sure that we get everyone covered in a quality, affordable way as quickly as possible. I believe that healthcare is a human right. And in order to get people covered as quickly as possible, I believe in expanding a public option on the way towards Medicare for all. This healthcare issue is one that is deeply personal for me. I have been by my mother's side over the last 4 years as she went from being healthy and vibrant and active one day to being incredibly sick the next. And it is not okay that it costs thousands of dollars a year in prescription drug costs in order for her to stay alive. It's not okay that families all over our district, our Commonwealth, and our country are in a position between having to choose the roof over their head or the food on the table, or the prescription drugs that they need to stay alive. And it's something that I just think we absolutely have to take on and tackle in this country, and make prescription drugs far more affordable, allowing the federal government to negotiate drug prices, capping out-of-pocket costs, and allowing for the importation of vetted prescription drugs from trading partners that we trust.
You know, a lot has been made by many of the Democratic candidates, and you've touched upon it already, that helping those who need help. In terms of education, what is your philosophy in terms of making sure our, K through 12 schools are solid and are accessible to all, as well as higher education? There's a lot of more talk about having states be involved with providing free higher education to some within our community.
So I think that we need to start by implementing universal pre-K and expanding affordable childcare, because we know that the opportunity gap starts at the very beginning of a child's life. Undoubtedly, we need to make college far more affordable than it is today. And I believe that lack of resources should never limit someone from attaining higher education. We've got to ensure, I think, that young adults have a menu of options to pursue as they are coming out of 12th grade. And whether we're talking about investing in and expanding access to community college, to technical training programs and labor apprenticeships, which has really been a model of how apprenticeships can really be utilized. And then we've got to get really serious about alleviating the crushing burden of student debt, canceling debt for low-wage earners, enrolling other students into a manageable loan repayment program, and creating and rapidly expanding national service programs. And I think the most important thing here is making sure that all of our young people have what they need to be equipped for advancement and success. And there's a lot more, I think, that we need to be doing than we do today.
You know, that also leads to, after you get your education, finding jobs within our workforce. How important is it to not only look at building what America is good at now, but taking advantage of other opportunities in technology and the like?
Yeah, well, you know, a couple things to say about that. First of all, I think it's really important to be talking about how there's a 5 times differential in annual median household income from the north to the south part of this district. That is a microcosm of what has been going on in our country as a whole and is not okay. And I think we need to be investing in the future that we want to see. And I'm specifically thinking about the clean energy future when I think about that. There is a defunct coal-fired power plant in Somerset, Brayton Point, which I think is a real concrete example of what I'm talking about. A site that stands poised to be the hub for the offshore wind renewable energy industry and could bring really high quality, good paying jobs that will also bring us closer to that clean energy future that we know we need to tackle the climate crisis, which is already here and growing. That is something that the next member of Congress has got to continue fighting for and to bring over the goal line, and could really establish not just the 4th district, but the southern part of our district as a leader in a clean energy and green energy future.
Are you in favor of the Green New Deal?
Yes, I am. And I think as we're coming out of the pandemic and thinking about how we're going to put millions of people back to work, that's a moment to put the principles and the value proposition of the Green New Deal into place. And what I mean by that is we've seen how the federal government can mobilize significant resources when it wants to. Well, I think we should mobilize those resources to invest in our infrastructure that we know we need, to be investing in transit, to be investing in these clean energy projects, and to be putting millions of people back to work while we do it.
You know, prior to COVID-19, the economy was doing very well and unemployment was low. Many people were working, the economy chugging along. Even though there were some disparities in terms of income, those on the upper end of the income scale continued to do well. Those on the bottom were getting by, but could have done better. As a member of Congress, how do you propose closing that gap in terms of income inequality?
Well, I think it starts by raising taxes on the wealthiest among us, implementing a progressive tax code, investing in accessible, affordable childcare and universal pre-K, because as I mentioned earlier, we know that the opportunity gap starts at the very beginning, investing in affordable housing and transit-oriented development, and prioritizing small business development, especially for those entrepreneurs who have had the hardest time getting access to capital historically. And by that, I mean women, minorities, veterans, and the disabled. You know, I mentioned earlier how there is this 5 times differential in annual median household income from the north to the south part of the district. One of the commitments that I made early on in this race is that if I'm so fortunate as to be elected, I'm going to have a member of my team whose priority focus is economic development in the South Coast, in the gateway cities, and in those parts of our district that, you know, were struggling coming out of the 2008 recession, never quite really got to the point of being able to catch up, and have been the hardest hit during this pandemic and the health and economic consequences of what we're going through. To me, investing in small business development is a really important priority step to rebuilding our economy and tackling that economic inequality that we're talking about.
Getting back to the Green New Deal and infrastructure and the like, how important is it? And I'm smiling because it's been talked about for almost 30 years. South Coast Rail coming to our region.
Right. I think it's incredibly important. I think that connecting people to where they need to go is incredibly important, not only to this economic inequality piece in terms of making sure that we have fluid, reliable transportation from where people live to where the jobs are to the cultural centers, and also that we have been underinvesting in it for so long. We all know how badly needed these infrastructure investments are. We also know how vitally important it is to making progress on our climate energy goals, and also to tackling the cost of housing. There's not a single community in this district that I visited where the topic of housing affordability hasn't come up. And it's because people are getting priced out of their homes, especially older adults who may be living on fixed incomes and are struggling to be able to stay in their home. And we know how we need to add to our housing stock, how important multifamily transit-oriented development is, and how that goes hand in hand with the investments in transit that you just mentioned.
You know, all the issues we've been talking about, income inequality, healthcare, education, police reform, those tend to be the driving factors when people go out and vote for a congressman or a congresswoman moving forward. But as a member of Congress, you're also going to be dealing with some foreign policy issues. What are your thoughts in terms of how the country has handled that, and how can you play a role to make things different?
Well, undoubtedly, the Trump administration has deliberately been working to tear down international institutions and values that we have spent decades building up. I think it's absolutely shameful that this president walked away from the Paris Climate Accord, has gutted our diplomatic corps, has cozied up to dictators while alienating our allies. And I believe that it's time for our country to prioritize diplomacy, to do that, to prioritize diplomacy instead of threats and bluster and the unilateral use of force that this president has supported and talked about, and that we need to be investing in building up our alliances across the world instead of tearing them down. And that Congress has to play a more proactive role in foreign policy and to hold our president accountable.
You know, with the campaign in its final legs in terms of 8 of you running for the Democratic nomination, this has been a different campaign with COVID-19. You know, normally the summer is a time where you're able to go out to festivals, large groups of people, do that door-to-door campaigning. How difficult has it been for you to, I guess, sort of run a non-traditional campaign?
Well, you know, of course, I would love to be out and meeting voters in person. And I think the most challenging element when you're just talking about campaigning is that we're not able to do that the way we would like to be. I'm really proud that our team has been very innovative and that we are reaching out to voters directly every single way we can. And that we've been using certainly our online platforms and social media to do that, as well as really calling and reaching out to individuals every moment we get. So, you know, we're really proud of how we are continuing to campaign through this. And we can't wait to be able to get back out onto the campaign trail safely. But in the meantime, we're going to continue working really hard to earn every single vote in this district.
The legislature and the governor recently just voted on a bill which will allow, will make it easier actually for people to vote, both in the primary and in the general election, vote by mail primarily. What are your thoughts about expanding that access?
Yeah, well, I'm thrilled to see it pass. And I think that it is vital that we conduct this election and all of our elections safely and responsibly, and that we are making voting accessible for everyone at all times. And it shouldn't have taken a pandemic to get us there. But I think that the direction that we're going in terms of voting access is a good one. And I'm really excited that people are going to have a really safe way to participate in this election.
As a city councilor in Newton, do you see any correlations between legislating on a city level and what may be happening in Washington? And how does that benefit you in terms of your candidacy?
I do, because I think that it all is about improving the quality of life for the constituents that I serve. And as a Newton City Councilor, I've been really proud to be an advocate for families, a champion for education, and to really prioritize openness and connection on an individual basis with my constituents. One of the things in Newton that I've done is to have office hours, not just in my own ward, but in all 8 wards, because I think it's really important to be present and to be inviting people in for that conversation. And it's one of the reasons that I've made the commitment and made it early on in this campaign in my first term as a member of Congress to have office hours in each of the 34 cities and towns in this district. And I think that's really important in terms of showing up, being present, and reaching out to my constituents to be able to invite those in-person conversations. I think in this race, we've got 9 candidates, and they all come from the northern part of the district. And I think it's really important for the next member of Congress to really be somebody who's showing up in every part of our district and making themselves very accessible and championing working families, which is what I've done as a city councilor and what I'm going to do as a member of Congress.
You were reading my mind. That was going to be my next question about how the 9 of you are from 3 communities, Brookline, Newton, or Wellesley. And, there may be some people in the Fall River area, Taunton, Attleboro, the southern part of the district may feel a little disconnect. How do you hope to bridge that gap? I know, you've been in the region a number of times. So how do you continue to reach out to those that are not from that northern part of the district?
It is exactly what you're saying about reaching out and about being present and about showing up, showing that commitment to represent the southern part of the district and backing it up with action. It's something that I've done certainly throughout this campaign. I'm going to continue to do. Why I've made that commitment to have a member of my staff whose priority focus is economic development in the South Coast. And I think that's been reflected in the endorsements and support that we have earned, including from State Senator Michael Rodericks, from Joan Menard, from a number of local elected leaders in Fall River and Attleboro and the surrounding communities. And I'm incredibly proud of that, proud to have earned the support and endorsement of the firefighters of Massachusetts, of the Mass retirees. And I think that speaks really to my commitment to be a representative for this district as a whole, and especially the southern part of the district, because I really do recognize what you pointed out, that with all these candidates coming from, from Brookline, from Newton, from Wellesley, I think it's really, really important to be investing in, understanding, reaching out, and making connections throughout the entire district. And it's just something I'm deeply committed to.
Along with the domestic issues that are important for people's lives, I think you may be hearing, I'm sure the other candidates as well, to the partisanship that has been part of Washington politics for quite a long time. How has, as one of 435, can you bridge that gap and try to get both sides of the aisle to work together? How difficult can that be, or easy?
Obviously Washington is not working right now. And what I would say is it's one of the reasons that I talk so much about being a mom in this campaign, because to me, being an effective member of Congress and being able to work well within my own party and across the aisle is about looking at the issues through the lens of what is in the long-term best interest for all of our kids, for working families, and for the future. And when you're looking at the issues through that lens, then I think it simplifies everything, and we're able to find where those common values are. And I think that if we're going to get serious about making progress on the issues that we care about, we need to be sending new and different types of leaders. And that's how we're going to bridge this divide. And it also comes down to building relationships, which is something that has been a real priority for me on the city council, and that I'm going to bring to Congress as well.
Finally, Becky, as we wrap things up, I'm going to give you the opportunity to say a few words to the voters of Fall River, and how can they find out more about your campaign?
So you can find out more about us on my website at beckygrossman.com, and we've got links to all of our social media channels there. I would be deeply honored to earn each and every one of your votes. And for me, this race comes down to that passion of being a mom and what that's going to mean for the long-term best interest of our country. As I mentioned earlier, out of 435 members of Congress, we only have 25 who are mothers of school-age children. I believe that if we had 100 or 200 moms in Congress, it would change the conversation in Washington completely. And I hope that you'll go to our website to learn more about me, about the issues that we're really focused on in this campaign, and about how we're going to be a champion for working families.
Becky Grossman, Democratic candidate for the Massachusetts 4th Congressional District. Thank you for joining us and talking to the people of Fall River. Best of luck, and hopefully we can talk again soon.
I look forward to it. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. And I want to thank you for joining us here at FRC Media as we continue our look and interviewing the candidates in the 4th District. I'm Keith Tebow. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.